The Vernon, built in Chicago, Illinois by J.P. Smith in the summer of 1886. She was built for Alfred Booth, who was also from Chicago. And as well, later that same year, she would actually replace the package freighter A. Booth, which sank on August 29, 1886, near Duluth, Minnesota. The Vernon was described as one of the most elegant ships on the Great Lakes, and she came equipped with extensive brass fittings, along with 18 staterooms and one very large cabin lounge. She was a wooden passenger/package freighter, and she would operate from Chicago, transporting passengers and freight to Manistee, Michigan, as well as northern Lake Michigan areas as well. The Vernon had a length of 158 feet. She had a beam of 25 and a depth of 18. She also had a gross tonnage of 694 tons, and she could carry a net tonnage of 560. Within her was a 565 horsepower fore and aft compound engine, along with 2 Scotch Marine boilers as well. The Vernon would also support a crew of up to 25, and she could carry around 50 passengers or so at a time as well aboard her. When the Vernon was actually being constructed, sailors would go on to criticize the Vernon's builders for sacrificing her buoyancy and stability in return for speed. This may have played a part later in her demise, as she was also described as being built with too much shear and too little beam. Great Lakes shipping expert Steve Harold would go on to write, and I quote, "From the start, the Vernon was known to have an unusual, perhaps defective hull design. Even when empty, she had an extreme draft and sat very low in the water. Some people later declared it was even unsafe for her to carry significant amounts of cargo because she was then dangerously low in the water." End quote. On the day of her launching, August 6, 1886, there were over 5,000 onlookers, as well as Alfred Booth's 2 sons, watching as the Vernon would be launched. As beautiful and elegant as the Vernon was, she was built for speed. However, would the design choices and possible sacrifices play a part in the disaster that would happen on October 28th of 1887? On October 20th, 1887, the Vernon would depart from Chicago, Illinois, and make her way to Sheboygan, Michigan. She would be under the command of Captain George Thorpe. As the Vernon made her way to her destination, she would also have additional stops at Manitowoc, Wisconsin, Suttons Bay, Michigan, and St. Ignace, Michigan as well. It's estimated at the time that the Vernon had anywhere between 23 to 25 crew members aboard her as well. Now come October 28th, 1887. The Vernon would be making a return trip from Sheboygan, and she would come through the Manitou Passage in the afternoon hours. The Vernon would make a stop at Good Harbor Bay, and then she would also make another stop at Glen Haven, Michigan, and then later she would stop at Frankfort, Michigan as well. The weather for that night was fair, and it was around 9 p.m., possibly 10 p.m., however, that things would change, drastically as well. Finally, she would depart from Frankfort, Michigan in the late evening hours for Manitowoc, Wisconsin. As the Vernon was making her way, she would encounter a terrible northeast gale, which would grow in intensity and cause waves to swell against her. Still loaded with 23 to possibly 25 crew members, as well as 50 passengers, the Vernon would make a desperate fight out on Lake Michigan. Wave after wave would smash against the Vernon, and then it would eventually swamp her and extinguish her boilers within her. With the Vernon's boilers now out of commission, she was powerless and at the mercy of the wind and waves of the gale out on Lake Michigan. She would fight to stay afloat all night throughout the gale, helpless to go anywhere except for where the wind and waves would push her. At around 3, possibly 4 a.m. near Two Rivers, Wisconsin, the Vernon would sink and founder. When the Vernon sank, she was also carrying a cargo of 400 boxes of fish, 90 tons of pig iron, apples, 2,000 bushels of potatoes, and around 90,000 barrel staves and other general merchandise as well aboard her. There would end up only being one survivor, Alex Stone, a fireman. However, everybody else, the 23 to 25 crew members, and around 50 passengers or so, would all perish. Late on the same night and during the same storm that would tragically sink the Vernon, several vessels would actually come across large amounts of wreckage, bodies, and survivors in life rafts and a yawl. Captain Moran of the Superior would also identify that the Vernon did sink based on the wreckage, where he would see gold scroll work, and this was unique to the Vernons. The schooners Blazing Star, Horace A. Badger, and William Home, along with the tug Anderson, would pass through the same wreckage field, and they too would encounter large amounts of wreckage and corpses. However, this next part is quite shocking, though there must have been a reason for it. None of the ships that would pass through the wreckage field would stop to assist the survivors. I can only surmise, as it would have been a risk as they were fighting through the same storm themselves. Eventually, only 19 bodies would ever be recovered from the Vernon, and they would later be laid out in the Two Rivers fire station, which would serve as a temporary morgue for loved ones. Now, as to the final death toll number, it was again assumed that 50 people died on board the Vernon. However, this number would later be corrected to around 36, possibly 41 lives lost, as passengers would also embark and disembark at other ports along the way as the Vernon made her stops. Either way, the tragic and high death toll from the sinking of the Vernon would be one of the deadliest shipwrecks ever to have occurred in the Wisconsin area. The Vernon was valued at $75,000, which to today's standards is around $2.31 million in loss. Lastly here, on October 31st, the schooner S.B. Pomeroy, which was making her way from Chicago, Illinois to Green Bay, Wisconsin, would come across a life raft with 2 men on board. One of them would tragically have died from exposure, while the other, a 23-year-old Swedish fireman named Axel Stone, would survive. They would take him to Green Bay, where he would recount the details of the deadly disaster to the local newspapers of the sinking of the Vernon. Stone would claim that the Vernon was heavily overloaded to the point that less than 6 inches of freeboard remained above the waterline. He would also report that due to the excessive load, the Vernon's crew were unable to close the gangways. The Vernon would eventually be found in 1969 by Kent Bellrichard of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He would discover the Vernon resting intact in 210 feet of water, northeast of Two Rivers. The Vernon is keeled over to the starboard side, and however, though her pilot house and cabins, which would break away during the storm when she sank, lie west of her wreck in around 160 feet of water. The Vernon's cargo is still intact within her, and her gangways are still open, which would confirm Alex Stone's claims of her crew not being able to close them due to the excessive load of the cargo within her. SS DR Hanna. Built in 1906 by the American Shipbuilding Company of Lorain, Ohio. The Hanna would launch on October 20th of 1906, and then later she would begin service on November 12th of 1906. The Hanna would be a part for 13 years of the iron ore, coal, and grain trades across the Great Lakes. She would have a length of 532 feet, a width of 56, and a depth of 31. She also had a gross tonnage of 7,023 tons, and she could carry a net tonnage of 5,491 tons. For propulsion, the Hanna would have a good old-fashioned, you guessed it, triple expansion steam engine within her. She would also be able to carry a crew of around 31 at a time. The Hanna would also be a part of a few accidents. Take for example, on September 1st of 1910, the Hanna would collide with the steamer Harvey H. Brown. After this collision, though, the Hanna would be sent to Detroit, Michigan, where she would receive temporary repairs. On October 13th, 1915, the Hanna would have 37 feet of her foremast knocked off when she would strike the Superior Avenue high-level bridge in Cleveland. She would then go on to Detroit to have a new foremast installed. On May 19, 1916, the Hanna would also run aground near the Little Rapids Cut, this being after her steering gear within her would fail. Lastly, on September 6th of 1918, the Hanna again would run aground on the Detroit Shoal on Lake Huron. She was making her way for Indian Harbor, Indiana, with a cargo of iron ore aboard her. One other incident that is definitely worth mentioning here would happen in an ice jam in Whitefish Bay early one spring. The DR Hanna, along with several other freighters, would be stuck in ice. And from the photo you see here, the Daniel J. Morrell can be spotted next to her as well. Overall, the DR Hanna proved to be a very hardy, sturdy ship. However, all of that would change on May 16th, 1919. On May 16, 1919, the DR Hanna had departed from Duluth, Minnesota, and was making her way for Buffalo, New York. She had aboard her 377,000 bushels of wheat for her cargo. The weather that day was quite foggy, and this would be a contributing factor to the collision between the DR Hanna and the Quincy A. Shaw. At around 1:50 p.m., the DR Hanna was around 6 miles northeast of Thunder Bay Light on Lake Huron. As she was making her way, the Quincy would come out of nowhere and collide into the Hanna. The Shaw had a cargo of coal aboard her, and when she collided into the DR Hanna, she would gash a massive hole in her bow. The water began to rush in, although not fast enough to trap, thankfully, any of her crew members within her. After only minutes after the accident, the Hanna would actually begin to capsize and then sink in the deep water. Thankfully and fortunately, none of the 32 crew members aboard the DR Hanna would lose their lives in this collision. The crew members would be safely and securely taken aboard the Quincy, and from there it is also believed that they would transfer to a fish tug, which would go on to Alpena, Michigan, where they would be rescued. The cargo of the DR Hanna was valued at around $840,000, which translates to today around $15 million in 2025 at least. The bow of the Quincy A. Shaw in the collision was severely damaged, but thankfully she was able to return to service after repairs were made aboard her. The wreck of the DR Hanna now lies bottom side up, 6 miles northeast by east of Thunder Bay Island Light. She is in 130 feet of water. The John J Boland Jr., or some sources say just the John J Boland, was built in 1928 in Newcastle, Great Britain. She actually, though, was originally named the Tyneville when she was launched, and then shortly after renamed. The Boland had a length of 232 feet. She had a width of 43 and a depth of 17. She also had a gross tonnage of 1,939 tons. The Boland was a steel canal-sized bulk freighter. She would primarily carry coal as her cargo. The Boland would be bought and acquired by the Sarnia Steamship Company, and that is when she would receive her renaming. She would have a safe journey across the Atlantic and then begin her career on the Great Lakes. Along with her primary cargo of coal, she would also transport grain and other bulk loads, and this would be on the ports of Lakes Ontario, Erie, and the St. Lawrence River. Information on the Boland is a bit sparse. She would only serve about 4 years, and from what I can find, she would have an uneventful career. However, that would all change on October 5th, 1932. On October 5th, 1932, the Boland was making her way from Erie, Pennsylvania to Hamilton, Ontario. She would be carrying her normal cargo of coal. However, it is said that she was so overloaded with coal that one of the hatches was actually left open with coal overflowing onto the Boland's deck because of this open hatch. This would be a tragic incident that would happen. As the Boland was making her way out into Lake Erie, she also would encounter a terrible storm that would capsize her in only 4 minutes. The waves from this storm would wash over the deck of the Boland and into the open hatch, which was overfilled with coal. All of this water entering the holds of the Boland would eventually cause her to lose steerage, and then cause her to capsize. As the Boland capsized and sank, 4 crew members would tragically lose their lives. I've also come across conflicting reports as to the exact number of crew members that were aboard her during this terrible storm. It ranges from anywhere between 15 to possibly 19 crew members. The other crew members, after the capsizing and sinking, would actually make it onto a lifeboat, where they would row to shore to safety. As the Boland sank, she would come to rest in about 130 to 135 feet of water on her starboard side on the bottom of Lake Erie. Her wreck is in good shape, and she is actually a popular dive site. Her pilot house, bow gear, and stern, including the propeller, are at about 40 feet above the bottom, still visible and accessible. And with that being said, that is 3 more stories of 3 lesser-known shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. Man, what a harrowing account for that last one. The Boland. I read as well that because of this accident, there were a lot of changes on the shipping industry. I don't understand how that was completely okay to be so overfilled and overflowing with coal, spilling out onto your deck like that. And then, yeah, she's making her way out onto Lake Erie and, of course, encounters a storm. And Lake Erie is one of the shallowest of the Great Lakes. She capsizes and sinks in the deeper part of Lake Erie. Just infuriating, really, and very sad that four crew members had to lose their lives because of this. I don't know if it's mismanagement, but because of the time and probably the regulations that just weren't up to snuff yet. But it did change a lot of things with her loss. And I'm glad I came across this story, and I wanted to bring it to light for you guys. Also, the DR Hanna, that could have ended tragically. How nobody lost their lives on that one is a miracle. 32 crew members, and she sank pretty quickly within minutes after being collided by the Quincy A. Shaw. That is incredible that nobody lost their lives. And then the Vernon, that apparently there's quite a bit of information on the Vernon. When I present these stories to you guys, I try to give a good, fair series of timeline of events and not try to gloss over the story, but give you the good points and the good details of it. But I always hope that you will do your own research, do your own research and enjoy these stories, but also go and dig deeper and find out more, because there is always more to these stories and these wrecks and the events and things that happen. So let this video inspire you guys to do your own research and just enjoy the rich maritime history for all of this. But with that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below, if there's any corrections or spelling errors or anything like that, or if you guys have any other interesting details to point out. I always look forward and welcome to your comments in the comment section down below. And this was a great episode to film. I'm sure there'll be many more to come, but let me know what you guys think. And also, another reminder here, guys, if you haven't signed up for the Shipwreck Festival out in Livonia in the Detroit area, I'm going to be there. I would highly recommend you guys go there. And the guests that are going to be there, Rick is, of course, going to be there, and many more people. It's really worth it, and it would be great to see you guys there. Again, I'm not a speaker or a presenter, but I'm definitely going to be there and enjoying every bit of it. So I would highly recommend, if you guys are thinking about doing it, maybe you should. So thank you all. I thank you very much for your support and joining me again on today's episode. And as always, God bless you, and I will see you again on the next episode of Songs of the Great Lakes.